They turned off my phone first. No warning, no explanation, just silence where a dial tone should have been. At my age, silence can mean many things. But that morning, sitting at my kitchen table with trembling hands and a cup of coffee already going cold, I understood one thing clearly. Someone had done this to me on purpose. And when my debit card was declined an hour later in the grocery store, me a 78-year-old woman buying bread and tea, I felt something inside me shift with a slow, cold click. By noon, the internet was gone too. 3 cuts in one day. Clean, precise, not an accident. It takes a special kind of cruelty to corner an old woman like that and still call it care. I sat in my living room, the one place in this house that still felt like it belonged to me, and stared at the useless phone on the table. The screen was black as if it refused to look at me. I'd lived here for 42 years. I raised my son Brian here, lost my husband here, paid off every inch of this place, with my own hands and long nights at the clinic. But that afternoon it felt as if the walls were listening, waiting for me to break. At 3:12 p.m., Brian and his wife Laura walked in without knocking. They had keys, of course. I'd given them keys 8 years ago, back when I still believed kindness was something people remembered. Laura's heels clicked on my hardwood floor like she was entering a hotel lobby, not the home of the woman who once babysat her daughter through every flu season. Mom Brian said the way a person addresses a stubborn pet. "We need to talk. I didn't stand up. Age teaches you the power of staying seated." "What happened to my phone?" I asked. Brian sighed. He had always sighed as if the world disappointed him on purpose. "We turned off the plan. You don't need all that technology. It's confusing for you." I looked him straight in the eye. "It worked fine yesterday. That's not the point." Laura cut in. She placed a folder on my table without asking permission, as if I were some patient signing discharge papers. "We're simplifying things, streamlining. You've been struggling to keep up with Bill's appointments login. It's getting unsafe." Unsafe. A word people use when they want control. I haven't struggled with anything, I said quietly. Brian ignored that. "Your card is paused for now. We're consolidating your accounts. You'll get a small weekly allowance and we'll handle the rest. Allowance as if I were a child with sticky fingers. And the internet?" I asked. Laura gave me a sympathetic smile. "The kind you use on someone who doesn't know they're being insulted. It's too easy to fall for scams at your age. We can't risk you being manipulated." I let the words hang between us. Manipulated. The irony was almost elegant. Brian sat down across from me, leaning forward as if he expected me to thank him. "Mom, we're doing this for your own good. You should have let us take over earlier. You've been slipping." Slipping. Another word used to tie a rope around someone's wrists without leaving marks. I folded my hands in my lap to keep them from shaking. "Brian, give me back my accounts." He shook his head. "No, it's done." They thought that was the end of the conversation. They thought that age softens a person into compliance. But age doesn't make you weak. It makes you patient. It teaches you to wait until someone exposes themselves fully. Laura stood. "We'll check on you tomorrow. Try to rest. It's been a lot of change." They walked out as calmly as they had walked in, leaving the folder behind. Thick, heavy, full of decisions that weren't mine. As the door closed, I reached for the folder with a steadiness I didn't know I still possessed. I opened it slowly, carefully, like lifting the lid off something that might hiss. The first page nearly took my breath away. It had my signature only. I had never signed it. And that was the moment. Quiet, sharp, unforgettable, when I understood. If they thought they'd cut me off, they had no idea what I still had left to turn on. I didn't sleep that night. Sleep requires a quiet mind, and mine was anything but quiet. The forged signature lay on my kitchen table like a small, well-mannered crime. I kept the papers where they were under the yellow light of the old lamp and sat nearby with a blanket over my shoulders, listening to the refrigerator hum. At 78, you learn to hear meaning even in background noise. And that night, the silence between those hums sounded like warning. By morning, I had reviewed every page twice. Every page carried the same false signature. My name written by a hand that thought I'd never check. A hand that believed age made a person blind. I pressed my finger to the paper. The loops were too wide. The pressure was wrong. Brian had rushed it. He'd always been sloppy when he thought he had already won. At 9, I heard the familiar scrape of the mailbox. The sound startled me more than it should have. I stood carefully joint stiff and went to retrieve the mail. A bill for utilities, a glossy magazine I never subscribed to, and an envelope from my insurance provider with a notice of updated financial authorization, something I hadn't requested. The net they were building around me was wider than I'd assumed. I made tea strong, hot, no sugar. Then I took a long breath and called the bank using my neighbor's phone because mine was still dead. Her grandson had shown her how to use speaker mode, and she let me borrow it with a soft, worried frown. I dialed slowly, making sure my voice wouldn't tremble. "Hello, this is Mary Howren," I said. "I need to speak with someone regarding unauthorized changes to my financial accounts." After the usual menu options and transfers, a young woman with a steady voice answered, "Mrs. Howren, I see several updates were submitted yesterday. A new primary manager on your account, a restricted outgoing transfer limit, and a caretaker authorization filed on your behalf. Caretaker authorization." I repeated, tasting the words like something sour. "And who is listed as caretaker? Your son, Brian Howren." Of course, the woman hesitated. "It was accompanied by a signature from you, ma'am. I didn't sign anything." Silence, a respectful one. "Then, Mrs. Howren, would you be able to come in today in person? We may need to start a fraud review." Fraud. The word seemed too large for something built of small betrayals. But that's how these things start. A signature here, a phone line there, a card turned off under the guise of concern. "Yes," I said, "I'll be there within the hour." I thanked my neighbor, put on my coat, and walked the 3 blocks to the bus stop. I hadn't taken the bus in years, but independence is made of small decisions. And that morning, I needed that bus more than I needed comfort. The driver helped me up the steps without comment. Kindness, the quiet kind, the kind you notice more when you've been starved of it. At the bank, the air smelled of polished wood and something citrus. A young manager with serious eyebrows invited me into her office. Her name was Ellen. She closed the door gently as if handling a frightened animal, though I didn't feel frightened. I felt awake. "Mrs. Howren," she said, "I reviewed the documents. Would you mind telling me whether this is your signature?" "It's not." I pushed the papers toward her. "I haven't signed anything in months." Her eyebrows lifted. "Then we'll need to freeze all pending changes immediately." "The forged documents won't take effect," she typed quickly. "But I need to warn you, someone attempted to initiate a full financial guardianship request." My throat tightened, not with panic, but something older, deeper. "Guardianship is a cage with legal hinges. Is it finalized?" I asked. "No," she said. "Not yet." "But they filed the intent." She met my eyes. "Did you give your son permission to manage your money?" "No," I answered simply. "Then you're still in control, for now. For now." Those two words did something to my spine, straightened it, anchored it. Ellen slid new forms toward me. We can restore your access, issue a new card, and register your voice authentication. But after that, you may want to consider legal consultation, just to protect yourself. Protect myself. The irony stung, considering the people I needed protection from lived 10 minutes away. I left the bank with a new temporary card, a folder of documents, and a kind of quiet resolve I hadn't felt in years. Outside, the wind had picked up. I pulled my coat tighter around me and started the walk home. Halfway there, my useless dead phone, vibrated faintly in my coat pocket. It startled me. For a moment, I thought perhaps Brian had turned the service back on, but when I pulled it out, the screen flashed a single message. Service restored. Please contact administrator. Administrator, not family, not me. Someone had control. Temporarily, maybe, but enough to know they weren't finished. I stood on the sidewalk, wind tugging at my hair, watching the message flicker. They thought restoring the phone would calm me, lull me, make me compliant. But all it did was confirm what I already knew. They hadn't streamlined my life. They had declared themselves my keepers. And now they were about to learn what it feels like when the person you underestimate stops playing along. By the time I reached my front steps, a strange calm had settled over me. Not peace. No peace comes when a storm has passed. This was the stillness before the storm, the kind where even birds know to quiet down. I unlocked the door, hung my coat, and placed the bank folder on the kitchen table next to the forged papers Brian and Laura had so confidently left behind. They sat there like two versions of my life. The one they wanted for me, and the one I still intended to claim. I turned on the kettle out of habit, though I knew I'd barely taste the tea. While it hissed, my phone buzzed again. Not a call, just the same cold message. Service restored. Please contact administrator. Administrator. A word that made my stomach tighten. Someone still believed they had the authority to oversee my life. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Not a gentle ring, a sharp, impatient jab. I didn't have to look through the peephole. Only one person rang a doorbell like it owed him money. Brian stood there, red in the face, shoulders hunched with self-righteous fury. He pushed inside before I could invite him. The way someone walks into property they believe they own. Mom, what the hell did you do at the bank? I closed the door slowly, carefully, making sure my voice stayed level. I corrected your mistake. My mistake. He stepped toward the kitchen table, his eyes locking onto the bank folder. You froze the accounts. You made everything 10 times harder. I was fixing your situation. My situation, I repeated. You mean my life? That's dramatic, he threw back. Mom, you're 78. You can't keep track of things. You left bills unpaid. You forgot appointments. You nearly fell for a phone scam 2 months ago. I hung up. I interrupted. That's not falling for it. You told the man your address. I told him the street name, not the number. Brian threw up his hands. You're proving my point. No, I thought I was proving his excuse. I walked past him to the kettle, poured the water, and let the steam rise between us like a thin wall. You forged my signature, I said quietly. His jaw worked tightening and loosening, uneven rhythm. He didn't deny it. He didn't dare. Instead, he adjusted course like he always did when caught. Laura and I talked to a lawyer. We were told it was the best path if you were resisting help. The system is slow, Mom. We were trying to speed things up by impersonating me. It's just paperwork. It's a legal document. It's not like we were stealing. My laugh cut through the air so sharply that he flinched. I couldn't remember the last time I'd laughed like that. Not amused, not bitter, but simply done. You took my phone plan, my bank cards, my internet. You requested guardianship and you didn't even bother to tell me. I set the cup down carefully. If that isn't stealing Brian, you'll have to explain to me what is. He paced the room, running a hand through his thinning hair. He used to have a full head of it, dark and thick. Now it looked like his conscience, patchy and brittle. You don't understand, he said finally. You're vulnerable. Laura and I have been carrying so much. The mortgage, Cassid's car, the medical bills. Ah, there it was. His slip. My medical bills, I asked. He froze. Brian, I said softly, your bills are not my responsibility. They will be, he muttered almost under his breath. And that was all I needed to hear. He wasn't trying to protect me. He was trying to protect his lifestyle. I walked past him, opened a drawer, and pulled out a thick stack of envelopes, receipt statements, charitable donations, college payments for Cassidy, back when she still spoke to me without rolling her eyes. I placed them next to the forged documents. Do you see this? I asked. This is 20 years of me helping you quietly, consistently, without judgment. He looked at the papers but didn't touch them. And this, I tapped the forged signature, is how you repay me. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again like a man drowning and unsure whether to swim or blame the sea for being wet. Things are hard for us right now, he whispered, as if hardship excused betrayal. Then ask, I said. Ask me like a son, not a thief, he snapped. We did ask. You always make it complicated. No, I answered calmly. I make you accountable. That's different. For the first time since he arrived, he looked small. Not young, just small. Like someone who had built his confidence on the assumption that I would never push back. Then his phone buzzed. He checked it, scowled, and shoved it back into his pocket. Laura wants to know what's happening, he muttered. I'm sure she does, I replied. He stared at me for a long moment, some calculation ticking behind his eyes. Then this isn't over, Mom. You're right, I said. It's not. He left without another word, door slamming behind him. I waited until the vibrations settled in the floorboards. Then I sat at the table, pulled the forged documents toward me, and smoothed them out with both hands. They thought they'd cornered me, but all they'd done was give me something solid to fight with, and I had just begun. By late afternoon, the house felt too quiet, the sort of quiet that presses against your ribs. I moved slowly through the rooms, touching the backs of chairs, adjusting curtains, as if the house itself needed reassurance. But really, it was me who needed it. Every object in this place carried years of my life, things I'd earned, repaired, protected. Now my own family thought they could strip me of control over all of it with a handful of forged signatures and a few disconnected services. The bank folder lay open on the table, and I sat down again to read every page, not because I doubted what I'd seen earlier, but because understanding the entire structure of their plan mattered. If Brian and Laura were building a trap for me, I wanted to see every hinge. The guardianship request wasn't fully filed yet. That was the point that lingered like a small flame in the dark. If I hadn't gone to the bank this morning, it would have gone through in silence. One morning, I would have woken up legally reduced to a dependent adult, without even the right to write a check without supervision. The fragility of it made my hands tighten around the paper. I stood and went to the hallway closet. It took some effort to reach the box I kept on the upper shelf, an old shoe box wrapped in rubber bands. I carried it to the table and opened it carefully. Inside were folded letters, receipts, insurance agreements, and an old binder with plastic sleeves. My husband had always said, "Mary, keep your papers where you can find them." I used to think he meant it practically. Now I saw it was a warning disguised as advice. I spread the documents on the table. Property deed, updated insurance policy, my living, will pass medical authorizations, beneficiary forms. Not a single one of them gave Brian the authority he claimed. Not one gave Laura access to anything. They hadn't bothered to check. They assumed old age meant disorganization. They didn't realize I'd spent decades keeping others' paperwork in order when I worked in the clinic. They forgot who I was before I became mom and grandma. As I sorted through everything, a pattern emerged, one I hadn't noticed until now. Over the last 2 years, Brian had asked me casually about my bank accounts. Laura had asked how much I kept in savings just for emergencies. Cassidy once asked, who would inherit the house? None of it had felt dangerous in the moment family talks about family things. But now, looking at all the pieces, it was obvious they'd been testing the locks long before they tried to break in. The doorbell rang again. One short ring this time, hesitant. I recognized the rhythm. My granddaughter Lucy, the only one who ever knocked softly. I opened the door and she smiled, though I could see worry in her eyes. "Grandma, Dad's been calling everyone. He's furious." "What happened?" I stepped aside. "Come in, sweetheart." She walked into the kitchen and stared at the papers on the table. "This looks serious." "It is," I said. "Your father tried to take control of my finances permanently." Her face tightened. "Grandma." "He wouldn't." She stopped herself. She wasn't foolish. She knew exactly what he was capable of, even when she wished she didn't. "I'm handling it," I told her. She sat down, leaning forward. "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" "Just honesty," I said. "Tell me, did they talk to you about moving me into assisted living?" She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. "Lucy," I repeated softly. She looked at her hands. "They mentioned it a few times. Laura said it would stabilize things. Dad said you were slipping." I exhaled slowly. Slipping is the word people use when they're trying to push you off a cliff. Lucy nodded, eyes glistening. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I didn't think they'd actually act on it." "You did think it," I said gently, "but you hoped they wouldn't." She covered my hand with hers. Her hand was warm, steady. "What are you going to do?" I looked at the forged papers, at the documents I had laid out, at the small empire of evidence forming on my kitchen table. "I'm going to protect myself," I said. "It's long overdue." Lucy squeezed my hand. "Tell me how I can help." Her voice trembled, but her spine didn't. And in that moment, I realized something simple and painful. I wasn't fighting my whole family, only the ones who had forgotten what family means. Lucy stayed for less than an hour, but her presence lingered in the house long after I watched her walk down the path. When the door closed behind her, the old silence returned, but it wasn't as heavy now. It felt like a companion instead of a threat. I gathered the papers on the table into 2 neat piles, one labeled by truth, the other by betrayal. The latter was thicker. By early evening, I heard a car pull into my driveway. Not Brian's, thankfully. This engine was smaller, the tires gentler. When I peeked through the curtain, a woman in a pale blazer stood on the porch checking her clipboard. I knew exactly who she was before she even rang the bell. A care coordinator, Laura's idea. The doorbell chimed. 2 polite notes carefully spaced. She had practiced the sound of concern. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. She smiled. The way people smile at frightened animals. "Mrs. Howren, I'm Megan with Brookside Senior Support. Your family asked me to check in." "Did they?" I said. My voice was calm, but calm can be sharp too. Yes, she replied, stepping slightly forward, though I hadn't moved. They mentioned you've been having trouble managing daily tasks and finances. They're concerned about your safety. My safety, always the same rehearsed phrase. And you believe them, I said. She shifted her weight. We take all family reports seriously. It's our job to assess needs and offer solutions. I looked at her clipboard. May I see your referral? She hesitated, then handed it over. I scanned it quickly. Brian had written that I was forgetful, confused, and increasingly unable to manage basic decisions. He checked the box recommending assisted living evaluation. Not one word of it was true. Every word served his goal. I handed the clipboard back. Megan, how old are you? She blinked. 32. At 32, dear, you should know when someone is using you. Her cheeks flushed. Mrs. Howren, I'm just here to ensure your well-being. You're here to confirm their story, I corrected her. But I want you to look around. Do I seem confused? She looked past me into the house, scanning the tidy living room, the organized shelves, the clearly labeled folders on the table. There was no clutter, no chaos, nothing to suggest a mind slipping out of its own hands. No, she admitted softly. You don't. Good. Then you'll also understand why I won't be answering any personal questions today. She swallowed, then tried one more practiced line. Your family is worried about you. My family, I said, should worry about themselves. Megan lowered her clipboard. Her posture changed. Less official, more human. Mrs. Howren, may I ask something off the record? Yes. Do you feel safe from them? The question was so unexpected that for a moment I couldn't speak. Not because I was afraid, but because she had finally asked the right question. Yes, I said, but they may not feel safe from me. A flicker of surprise crossed her face, then understanding. She nodded. I'll note that you declined assessment, she said, and that you appear fully capable. If your family pushes for guardianship, this visit will matter. I know, I said. That's why I let you come to the door. She exhaled, relieved. If you ever need help, real help, you can call me directly. She tore a card from her folder and handed it to me. Not all people our age are lucky enough to stay sharp, but you are. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Her honesty, gentle as it was, felt like a small victory. After she left, I locked the door not out of fear, but out of intention. I placed her card beside the forged documents. The stack was beginning to look like ammunition. I made myself a simple dinner toast with butter-warm broth. My appetite wasn't fully present, but strength matters in times like these. When I finished eating, I washed every dish carefully, as if preparing the kitchen for an inspection. Because I knew Brian and Laura weren't done. Families like mine don't step back when confronted. They push harder until they meet something stronger than themselves. As I wiped the table dry, I caught sight of my reflection in the dark window. The lines on my face looked deeper, yes, but firmer. My eyes were tired but steady. I thought of Brian saying I was slipping. No, I wasn't slipping. I was waking up into a version of myself I'd ignored for too long. And if they wanted to test my limits, well, they were about to learn that I had more of them than they remembered. The next morning, the house felt strangely lighter, as if some invisible thread inside it had loosened. Maybe it was Megan's visit, someone finally seeing me, not the fragile little picture Brian tried to paint. Or maybe it was simply the clarity that comes after a sleepless night when decisions settle into place. I made oatmeal, ate half of it, and left the rest cooling on the stove. My mind wasn't on food. It was on the bank, on the forms I needed to sign, on the locks I needed to change. Not physical ones, but financial, legal, digital locks that Brian had assumed I'd never learn to manage. At 10 a.m., I took my old leather bag, put the forged documents inside, and walked out the door. The air was crisp, cold enough to sting a little. It kept me awake in a good way. I walked the 2 blocks to the bus stop again, ignoring the ache in my knees. Pain is tolerable when purpose is strong. When I arrived at the bank, the same manager, Ellen, saw me through the glass and waved me in. Her expression softened the moment our eyes met. Respect does not require dramatics. It only requires seeing someone clearly. "Mrs. Howren," she said, standing, "I'm glad you came. I'm here to finalize everything we discussed." She nodded and pulled out a stack of forms. "We'll restore full control to you. I've already flagged your file for fraud review. Any attempt from your son to modify your accounts will now require your in-person confirmation." Good. A barrier. One they would not expect. We spent nearly an hour going through documents. New card, new PIN, new online access voice authentication, 2-factor verification through a secure line they could not access. Ellen watched me as I signed, not with worry, but with something like admiration. "Most people your age," she said, "give up when their family pushes this hard." I set the pen down. Most people my age spent a lifetime being underestimated. We learn to stretch our patience farther than our children imagine. She laughed quietly. I believe it. When it was done, she gathered the forged papers I brought. "May I keep these copies for the fraud case?" "Yes," I said, "but I'll need scanned versions for my attorney. Of course I'll prepare them right now, attorney." The word felt almost foreign in my mouth, but comforting too. A reminder that I didn't have to fight this alone anymore. Not the legal part, at least. When I stepped outside, the sun had slid behind a cloud. The day felt colder, sharper. I walked slowly to the bus stop, but before I reached it, a familiar car turned the corner. Laura's silver sedan. She stopped right beside me, window rolling down with mechanical irritation. "Mary," she said, smile thin as tissue paper. "There you are. Brian said you were out running around. You should have told us." I looked at her calm. "I didn't realize I needed your permission to leave my home." Her smile wavered. "We're trying to keep you safe. You're trying to keep me dependent." She flinched. Just a flicker, but enough. "Brian is worried sick," she continued. "You froze the accounts. Do you know what position that puts us in?" I rested my hand lightly on my bag. Inside the bank, documents felt like armor. "You'll need to adjust," I said. "Adults do." She stared at me, searching for the soft woman she was used to manipulating. When she didn't find, her frustration crept into her tone. "You're being unreasonable. We came to help you yesterday, and you forged my signature," I interrupted. "If we're calling things by their names." Cars drove by. Children's voices echoed from down the street. Laura's face reened. "I don't know what Brian told you," she said, lowering her voice, "but you're confused. We never forged anything." I took the papers from my bag and held them toward her. The pages flapped lightly in the cold wind. "This isn't my confusion," I said. "It's your handwriting." Her lips parted, but no excuse formed. Her eyes darted around as if witnesses might materialize from the air. "Look," she finally whispered, "your situation is complicated. We're just trying to make sure everything is handled properly." "It already is," I said. "By me." Laura swallowed hard. Her confidence was cracking, hairline fractures spreading across her expression. "You need to stop fighting us," she said. "You're only making things worse." "Worse for whom?" I asked quietly. "For me or for the people who depended on my silence?" Her cheeks flushed again. She put the car in gear. Brian will call you, she said. This isn't over. I'm aware, I replied. She drove off too quickly, tires spinning slightly on the pavement. I watched her car turn the corner, then disappeared completely. I tightened my grip on my bag. No, this wasn't over. This was the part where they realized the ground under their feet was no longer steady, and I was the one who had pulled it away. When I came home from the bank, I half expected to find Brian waiting on my porch, like a dog scratching at the door. But the porch was empty, the house still, the air holding its breath. I slipped inside and locked the door with a firmness I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't fear, it was control. The afternoon passed in a quiet rhythm. I made tea, sorted a stack of old receipts, rewrote a list of numbers now stored under my new security settings. Each small task steedied me. Age slows the body, yes, but it sharpens intention. I'd learned that nothing collapses all at once. It collapses one ignored sign at a time. Brian had mistaken my silence for weakness. He never realized silence is also where planning grows. Around 5, my phone newly reactivated, newly mine began vibrating. First one call, then another, then a third, all from Brian. I let them ring out. A fourth came from Laura, then 2 from Cassidy. She hadn't called me in months. Now suddenly she remembered my number. Interesting. When the 6th call came through, it was from an unknown number. That one I answered. A young voice, breathless. "Grandma, it's Cassidy." I sat down. "I'm surprised to hear from you." She hesitated. "Dad said you're doing something crazy. He said you froze everything and now we can't." She cut herself off. "He said you're not thinking clearly." "Do I sound unclear to you?" I asked. Silence. "No," she admitted. "You sound different." Different. Good. That meant she'd finally met the version of me that didn't bend. "Cassidy," I said gently, "your parents have been using me for years. You know that." She didn't argue. She just breathed into the phone softly. The way people do when a truth they've avoided becomes too solid to ignore. "Grandma, Dad's really upset. Mom, too. They said you embarrassed them at the bank." "I protected myself," I corrected. "Embarrassment is a side effect." She laughed nervously. "They're saying they won't survive this month without help. That, I said, is not my emergency." There was a shift in her tone, softening, but also something like shame. "I didn't know it was this bad. You weren't meant to know." I said they hid the reality from you the same way they tried to hide their intentions from me. She sighed. "Grandma, are you safe?" I closed my eyes for a moment. The question, so similar to Megan's, struck a deep place in me. "Yes, sweetheart," I said. "I am okay." She took a shaky breath. "Just don't cut me out, too. I would never cut you out," I said. "But I'm done letting them use me." She didn't argue. She only whispered, "I'm sorry." Then hung up as if someone had come into her room. I stared at the phone. Regret curled in my chest. Not regret for what I'd done, but for how long I'd allowed myself to be diminished before doing it. Just as I set the phone down, a car door slammed outside. Heavy steps approached. The doorbell rang with an anger that rattled the glass. Brian, I didn't move. Let him ring. Let him pound. Let him feel the weight of a door that didn't open for him automatically. After the 3rd ring, he shouted, "Mom, open the door. We need to talk." Need, his favorite word. His? I walked to the door but didn't unlock it. "I'm not available," I said through the wood. "You can't do this to us," he yelled. "You've ruined everything." "No," I said calmly. "I've restored everything to its rightful owner." He jiggled the handle like a frustrated child. "Mom, open this door." "I will." I said, when you're ready to speak to me as a son, not a manager. His breathing grew loud, fast, furious, then silence. Footsteps retreating, a car engine starting. I waited until the sound faded. Then I turned away from the door, feeling something settle deep in my bones, something steady, something overdue. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't the one being managed. I was the one setting the terms. I didn't open the curtains the next morning. Let the house stay dim. Let the world wait its turn. I sat with a cup of tea that cooled too quickly and tried to gather my thoughts, but they kept circling the same point. If Brian and Laura had gone so far already, this wasn't desperation. It was preparation, meaning they'd been planning this long before I noticed the cracks. Around 11, I made myself walk to the small legal office 3 streets over. The sign was fading, the doorbell slightly crooked, but the man inside, Mr. Kent, had a reputation for being sharper than anyone expected. He looked surprised when he saw me. "Mrs. Howren, how can I help you?" "I need advice," I said, sitting down carefully, "about my rights, about my family, and about a signature that isn't mine." His expression tightened at that last part. He leaned forward. "Tell me everything." And so I did, not dramatically, not tearfully, just plainly. Dates, actions, documents, the sudden shut-off of my accounts, the forged signature, the attempted guardianship filing. He listened without interrupting, his pen unmoving above the page. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "They've crossed several lines already. You have grounds to challenge any future guardianship attempt. And if the signature is proven forged, they could face legal consequences. I didn't want my family in jail. I wanted them out of my pocket and out of my decisions. What can I do?" I asked, "to protect myself?" He slid a folder across the desk. "You can appoint an independent financial advocate, someone who isn't family, someone without personal stakes." He tapped the folder. "This protects your autonomy. Anyone trying to override your decisions will need to go through legal channels they cannot manipulate." I opened the folder. Clear terms, clear boundaries, clean lines. Exactly what my son had never respected. Mr. Kent continued, "And I suggest documenting everything. Dates, calls, visits, anything that feels off. Paper trails matter. Paper, I had plenty." I signed the initial forms with a steady hand. His signature followed mine, crisp and confident. For the first time in weeks, something in my chest loosened. "Thank you," I said. "You're welcome," he replied. But Mrs. Howren expect pushback. People who are used to control rarely surrender it quietly. He was right. When I stepped out of the office, my phone buzzed again. Brian, then Laura, then an unknown number. Probably Cassidy using a different phone. I didn't answer any of them, but one voicemail slipped through while I was walking. Brian's voice, low and furious. "Mom, we need access to the accounts. This isn't funny. If you don't fix this today, we're going to take other steps. Other steps." The phrase landed heavily, exactly as he intended. I reached my house, unlocked the door, and paused in the hallway. The air felt colder inside than out. The answering machine light blinked. One message time-stamped from half an hour ago. I pressed play. Laura's voice, brittle and edged. "Mary, you've made things very complicated. Brian's trying to hold everything together. If you don't cooperate, we'll have no choice but to escalate. You're not safe managing things alone." Then a pause long enough for intent to settle in. "We'll get you placed somewhere if we have to. Placed as if I were furniture." I pressed the delete button. Then I stood still until the quiet settled again. Deeper this time, sharper. They weren't hiding their intentions anymore. and that meant they believed they were close to winning. But while they escalated threats, I was building evidence not to punish them, but to ensure they never tried this again. And they had no idea how much I had already gathered. Evening settled early that day, the winter kind of dusk that makes the world feel smaller. I turned on just one lamp in the living room and left the rest of the house in shadow. It wasn't fear. I simply wanted the quiet to feel honest. I sat in my armchair, legal papers on one side, my old shoebox of documents on the other, and listened to the wind pressing against the windows. Around 7, a car engine approached, slow, familiar. Brian's. I didn't stand. Footsteps came up the path, heavy and confident. The way someone walks when they believe the situation is already leaning in their favor. He didn't ring the bell this time. He used his key. I heard the lock turn, and something inside me went colder than the air outside. He stepped into the hallway, shaking off the cold as if he lived here. Mom, we're talking now. I didn't invite him farther, but he came anyway, walking into the living room with the tense energy of a man determined to reclaim lost ground. His eyes landed on the papers strewn beside me. "So it's true," he said. "You hired a lawyer." I folded my hands. "I protected myself," he scoffed. "Protected yourself from your own family, from what my family tried to do to me," I corrected. He paced once, then stopped in front of me, hands on his hips the way he used to stand when scolding his daughter. "You've turned everything upside down. Do you realize how this makes us look? Megan said you refused the assessment. The bank flagged the account. You're acting erratically." There it was. The word they always reach for when power slips out of their hands. "I'm acting normally," I said. "You just don't recognize me like this." He leaned forward. "Mom, we were trying to help you. You're making it impossible. Bills are due. Payments aren't going through. We're drowning because of you." "Because of me?" I asked, voice low. "Not because you and Laura spent money you didn't have and planned your life around the assumption that I'd always bail you out." He stiffened. I had hit the truth cleanly. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about," I said. "I know you forged my signature. I know you filed for guardianship, and I know you planned to put me somewhere safe without ever asking me what I wanted." The word safe made his jaw tighten. "Nobody was going to put you somewhere." He lied automatically. "We were exploring options, options that removed my independence." He rubbed his forehead with both hands. "Mom, you're making a mountain out of paperwork. Nothing would have changed day to day." "So why lie about it?" I asked quietly. His hands dropped. His eyes flicked away. That was the answer. He wasn't worried about my well-being. He was worried about losing access to my accounts, my house, the stability he'd built from the assumption I wouldn't fight back. Finally, he said, "Laura and I are coming tomorrow. We're bringing documents. You need to sign them." I looked at him for a long moment. "No." His face wrined. "You don't even know what they are. I know enough. You're being impossible." "No," I said, my voice steady, even warm. "I'm being myself. It's just been a long time since you bothered to notice who that is." He glared at me, breathing hard. "If you don't cooperate, we'll take this further." "I'm aware," I said, "and I'm prepared." He didn't expect that answer. Not from me. Not from the version of me he'd grown accustomed to. He grabbed his coat, stomped toward the door, and hesitated only once at the threshold, just long enough to say, "You're going to regret this." "I already regret many things," I replied. "But not this." He left without looking back. I waited until the sound of his car faded into the darkness. Then I locked the door not out of fear, but because I knew something he didn't. The more desperate people become, the more they reveal. And soon I suspected Brian and Laura were going to reveal everything. The house was cold the next morning, colder than the weather outside could justify. I moved room to room, turning up the heat, but the chill wasn't in the air. It was in the knowledge that Brian and Laura were coming with documents, their last attempt to corner me before I closed the door on their plans for good. I dressed slowly, choosing my navy cardigan, the one with firm shoulders. Clothes don't make you stronger, but sometimes they remind you that you still have shape. I made tea, toasted a slice of bread, and forced myself to eat it. Strength is practical. It needs fuel. Then I sat at the kitchen table and opened the shoebox again. I added new items to the pile marked Truth. Ellen's printed notes, Mr. Kent's signed forms, Megan's business card with her neat handwriting on the back. Call me if they push again. The pile grew into something solid, evidence a spine. Around noon, I walked to my doctor's clinic, not because I was unwell, but because I needed one more piece of preparation. The nurse recognized me immediately. "Mary," she said softly, "haven't seen you in a while. I want a full evaluation," I told her. Cognitive, physical, everything. I want it documented. The nurse didn't ask why. Some people don't need explanations. They just listen. Tests were done, questions asked, reflexes checked. The doctor smiled at the end. "You're healthier than most 60-year-olds, he said, "and your cognition is sharp as ever." "Put that in writing," I said. He did. When I stepped back out into the cold, I felt something settle inside me like a stone dropping exactly where it belonged. That document alone would dismantle half of Brian and Laura's claims. Back home, I placed the medical evaluation on top of the truth pile. The air felt warmer now, quiet, steady, prepared. At 3 a car door slammed outside, then another. I heard their footsteps. 2 sets. Brian's heavy. Laura's clipped. I didn't open the door until the second ring. Laura walked in. First face tight with saccharine concern. Brian followed, jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. "We brought the paperwork," Laura said, lifting a folder like it was something holy. I nodded at the kitchen table, set it down. She did, then opened it dramatically as if revealing a prize. "It's a simplified financial agreement. It ensures you'll have support with—" "I won't be signing it," I said. Brian stepped forward. "Mom, don't start." I opened the Navy folder, the one containing the truth, and slid the medical evaluation across the table. "Before we discuss anything," I said, "read this." Laura glanced at it, then frowned. "A medical report." "A complete one," I answered, certifying that I am fully competent. Brian skimmed it, and I watched the blood drain from his face. I placed another document beside it. Mr. Kent's notarized declaration appointing an independent advocate. Laura's eyes widened. "What is this protection?" I said simply. Brian exhaled sharply. "You went to a lawyer, a doctor." "Mom, why are you doing all of this? Because you forced me to." He slammed his palm on the table. "We were trying to help you." "No," I said. Voice low, calm, immovable. "You were trying to control me." Their folder, the one they brought, suddenly looked flimsy, childish even. Laura reached for it as if hiding it might undo what was already laid bare. "It's too late," I told her gently. Brian stared at me with something like disbelief. "You're really choosing this fight?" "I'm choosing myself," I said. For the first time, neither of them had a response. Just fear, thin, quiet, dawning fear of a woman they thought they'd already defeated. I closed the Navy folder. "You should go," I said. They hesitated, but the truth on the table left no space for argument. They gathered their things and left without a word. When the door shut behind them, the silence was warm again. I sat down, folded my hands, and let the stillness wash over me. Preparation was done. Now came the consequences. The morning after their visit arrived with a dull sky and air heavy enough to feel like a warning. I woke earlier than usual, the way people do before important days. I made tea, but I barely drank it. My mind was on what I knew was coming, the follow-up visit from Megan, the care coordinator. She had said she might stop by again to check in, but I knew that wasn't her only reason. Someone had pushed her. Someone wanted confirmation. And someone expected her to walk into a house where I was frightened, confused, ready to surrender. But the house that morning was orderly, every paper sorted, every document ready. At 10, a soft knock came at the door. Not Brian's impatient pounding, not Laura's clipped rhythm. A gentle knock. Megan. I opened the door and stepped aside. Come in. She entered slowly, eyes scanning the room with professional attention. When she saw the 2 stacks of documents neatly arranged on the dining table, truth and betrayal, her brows lifted. You've been busy, Mrs. Howren. Staying prepared, I said. She smiled faintly. You look well stronger than the last time I saw you. Clarity helps. She sat at the table, setting her tablet down. Your son contacted our office again. He said you were refusing necessary support. He insisted we conduct a full evaluation. I sat across from her. Did he tell you why he really wants it? She sighed. I suspected something was off, but I can't make assumptions, Mrs. Howren, I need documentation. I reached for the first stack, the truth, and handed her Mr. Kent's notarized form. Her eyes widened as she read. You appointed an independent advocate. Good, very good. Next, I slid the medical evaluation toward her. She scanned it carefully. This is recent, she said, and thorough. Yes, this alone disqualifies most guardianship claims. She looked up at me. They won't like that, I'm aware. And the forged documents I added, lifting the second stack. When she read the first page, her face changed. The professional neutrality dissolved, replaced by controlled anger. Mrs. Howren, she said slowly, this is a serious offense. Yes, I replied, but they expected no one to question it. She set the papers down carefully, as if they were evidence in a case, and in truth they were. Would you like me to file an internal note? She asked, stating you are fully capable in refusing assistance voluntarily. Yes. Would you like me to add that your family's interference is unwarranted and potentially harmful? Yes. She typed steadily, each keystroke a small restoration of dignity. After a minute, she stopped and looked at me again. Not with pity, but with respect. You're one of the few people your age, she said, who sees the pattern before the net tightens. I've lived long enough to recognize a trap, I said, especially one built in my name. She nodded. With these documents, any attempt at guardianship will be dismissed immediately, and Brian's repeated reports, they now read as coercive. I felt a quiet strength settle in my chest, not triumph, just steadiness, ground. Megan closed her tablet. Do you want me to speak to your son directly? Clarify that you are not at risk, not confused, and not agreeing to any placement. No, I said let him wonder how you came to that conclusion. A soft laugh escaped her. Fair enough. She stood and gathered her things. You are safe, Mrs. Howren. Legally, medically, administratively, they can't move anything forward now. Good, I said, because they were counting on my silence. She paused at the door. If they push again, call me or your lawyer or both. I will. When she left, I stood in the doorway for a few seconds, letting the cold air brush against my face. Not harsh, just real. Inside the house felt different. Not a battleground, a place reclaimed. The truth pile on the table was taller now, solid, heavy with evidence. And for the first time since this began, I realized something simple. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was leading. The next morning began with a kind of clarity that didn't feel like mine, but rather like the house itself had decided to stand with me. The air was still the light pale, and everything felt balanced as if waiting to see what I would do next. It didn't take long for the first sign to arrive. At 9:15, 3 notifications came through on my reactivated phone, one after another. Credit card removed, transfer blocked, auto payment declined. Not mine, Brian's. For years, he had attached his temporary card to one of my accounts for emergencies. I had forgotten about it because he never mentioned it again. But the moment I restored full control yesterday, that card became an orphan, unfunded, unsupported, rejected. And now he was discovering that a life built on quiet access collapses loudly. I made tea and waited. 20 minutes later, my voicemail icon blinked. I didn't listen. Not yet. Instead, I sat at the dining table and wrote the date at the top of a fresh notebook page. Then bullet points. Simple, sharp. Notification of blocked transfers. Brian's dependent card disabled. No further access from their devices. Documentation just as Mr. Kent had instructed. By noon, the repercussions deepened. A formal email from the bank arrived. Unauthorized access attempt failed. Multiple password resets blocked. Someone was scrambling. Then the house phone rang. Not my cell, the landline, the one only a handful of people knew. I let it ring twice before answering. Laura's voice came through thin and controlled. "Mary, we need to discuss what you did." "What I did?" I asked, keeping my tone level. "You financially crippled us," she snapped. Brian's card was declined. "Our utilities are not my responsibility," I said calmly. "You can't do this," she burst out. "You're punishing us." "No," I replied. "I'm removing myself from your budget." Silence. Sharp, stunned silence. Then a different tone. Lower. More dangerous. "If you think this is finished, Mary, it's not. We can still file." "I would advise against threatening me again," I interrupted. "Every call is being logged." She inhaled sharply as if the air itself cut her. "You're making a mistake." "No," I said again, "I'm correcting one." She hung up without another word. I placed the phone down gently, almost tenderly. Winning doesn't require shouting. Sometimes it just requires removing the oxygen from someone's entitlement. When I checked my cell phone again, I saw a message from Lucy. "Dad's losing it." He said, "You betrayed him." "Are you okay? Do you need me?" I typed back. "I'm fine. Stay out of this part. It's not yours to carry." She tried to call, but I declined. I loved her too much to let her serve as their messenger. At 3:00 p.m., Megan called. Her voice was crisp, professional. "I wanted to inform you," she said. "Your son attempted to schedule an emergency evaluation behind your back. We declined it. Your file now states clearly that no assessments are to be initiated without your request." "Thank you," I said. And Mrs. Howerin, we added a note. "One that may help. What kind of note that your family's behavior appears coercive and financially motivated?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. Not because I was overwhelmed, because truth spoken aloud has a weight to it, and this one landed exactly where it should. "Good," I finally said. "Let it be documented." After the call, I walked to the living room window. Outside, winter sunlight spread across the yard in a thin, pale sheet. Not warm, but honest. For the first time in a long while, I felt no tremor in my hands, no doubt, no hesitance. Brian and Laura still believed they were pushing me back into place, but they hadn't realized something important. I had stopped trying to hold them off. I was pushing back, and I wasn't done yet. Brian didn't come the next morning. I knew he wouldn't. Men like him retreat for a short while not to reflect, but to regroup. Silence for him wasn't peace. It was strategy. But by late afternoon, the break in the quiet came. His car door slammed outside with a force that made a startled crow take off from my maple tree. I stayed seated in my armchair. I didn't rush to meet him. I didn't straighten my sweater. I had nothing to perform. He rang the bell once, then again, harder. Then he tried the doorknob, forgetting or refusing to accept that I'd changed the locks. "Mom," he barked, "open the door." I stood, walked slowly, and opened it just enough to see his face. Red, exhausted, cornered. "Come in," I said softly. He pushed past me. He didn't even take off his coat. The air around him felt charged, restless, like someone preparing to make a last demand. "You've humiliated us," he said immediately. "Do you understand that—" I closed the door behind us. "Sit, Brian." "I don't want to sit. I didn't ask what you want," I replied quietly. "Sit." It startled him. Something in my tone, something he hadn't heard from me in years, made him stop resisting. He sat. He rubbed his face with both hands. "Everything's a mess. The accounts, the bills, the transfers, they were never yours to rely on," I said. His head jerked up. "We counted on that support. You counted on my silence," I corrected. He stared at me, breathing hard through his nose. "You've turned Lucy against us." "I've done no such thing," I said. "You manage that yourselves." His expression twisted. Anger mixed with something raw. Something like shame, though he'd never call it that. "You don't get it," he said. "I've been under pressure. Work's been slow. The house repairs stop." My voice wasn't loud, but it hit him like a hand raised. "Brian, you've been leaning on me financially since your 20s. You always had a reason, a crisis, a season of bad luck. And I helped every time. Not because you deserved it, because I loved you." He swallowed tightly. "But somewhere along the way I continued, you stopped seeing that love as a gift and started seeing it as an obligation." His throat worked. He looked away. "The truth isn't heavy because it's cruel. It's heavy because it's accurate." "You think I'm a bad son?" he muttered. "I think you're a man who forgot he grew up." He winced. Not violently, just enough to show the truth had landed. "You can't expect me to do this alone." He said, "Life's expensive, Cassidy." "Cassidy is not my responsibility." I said, "She's yours. Your family is yours. Your choices are yours." He pressed his palms flat on his knees, grounding himself. "We didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't mean for me to find out," I corrected again. His face flinched, small, sharp. For the first time, he didn't have a rebuttal ready. The room settled. The kind of settling that happens right before someone's last defense slips. "Mom," he said slowly, "do you hate me for this?" I sat across from him, folding my hands. "I don't hate you. I'm disappointed, and I'm finished pretending not to be." He blinked rapidly. The bravado drained. Behind it, I saw the boy he once was, fearful of losing approval, desperate to stay comfortable. "I don't know how to fix this," he whispered. "You start," I said, "by accepting that you cannot fix it by taking more from me." He nodded weakly, like a man who has finally met the limit he didn't know existed. I stood. This conversation is over for today. Go home, Brian. He rose slowly like someone moving through deep water. At the door, he hesitated. Will you still talk to me? He asked, voice thin. Yes, I said. As long as you speak to me as a son, not a custodian. He nodded once, unable to hold my gaze, then stepped outside. When the door closed, I leaned my forehead against the wood, only for a moment, not from weakness, from release. The truth had been spoken quietly, precisely, without cruelty, and he had finally heard it. The next day arrived without drama, which in my life had become its own kind of surprise. No calls from Brian, no texts from Laura. Even the street outside felt muted, as if everyone sensed the shift and was waiting to see what happened next. I moved through the morning, quietly made breakfast, watered the plants in the window, folded laundry I'd been ignoring. Small tasks, but each one helped settle the tremor inside me that had lived there for months, years, if I'm honest. By noon, I finally sat down at the kitchen table with Mr. Kent's folder again. Today wasn't about defense. Today was about building something new, something mine, something that wasn't shaped around Brian's emergencies or Laura's expectations. I opened the trust documents. This wasn't about punishing anyone. Punishment was their language, not mine. What I wanted was clarity and fairness and dignity my own, and the future of the one person who had stood beside me without asking for anything in return, Lucy. I took out the estate forms, read through them carefully, and filled in her name as the primary beneficiary. Not Brian, not Laura, not Cassidy, who had grown too used to taking without listening. Lucy, the only one who had knocked softly, who had asked if I was safe, not whether I could still pay. I listed specific allocations, the house to be sold or kept at her discretion, my savings untouched by anyone but her, my small investment account, something Brian never even knew about, and a modest monthly stipend meant not to burden her, but to steady her. It felt strange writing her name in ink like that. Not because she didn't deserve it. She did, but because for the first time in decades, I was making a choice without fear of how someone else would react. When the documents were complete, I called Mr. Kent and scheduled a signing for the next morning. He answered on the first ring. Good, he said when I told him. This secures your autonomy. It also signals to anyone watching that your decisions are intentional, not reactive. Intentional, a word I hadn't heard directed at me in a long time. After the call, I leaned back in my chair and let the quiet settle again. It was a different kind of quiet now, less tense, more spacious. My phone buzzed once, a text from Lucy. Dad's acting strange today, quiet but calmer. Did something happen? I typed back. We talked. Don't carry it. It's not yours. She responded immediately. Grandma, whatever you're doing, I'm proud of you. That message sat warm in my chest long after I put down the phone. Around 4, I pulled the old photo box from the closet. I didn't know why. Maybe because preparing the future sometimes requires facing the past. Not to relive it, but to put it where it belongs. There were pictures of Brian as a boy smiling so wide his whole face scrunched. Pictures of my husband, his hand always somewhere near mine. Pictures of family dinners before resentment grew roots. I kept only a few. The rest I slid back into the box and closed the lid gently. Memory is not a place to live. It's a place to visit briefly when needed. As the sun began to set, I walked through the house once more. Everything looked different, though nothing had changed. It was simply mine again, fully unquestionably mine. Tomorrow I would sign the trust, secure every remaining document, and finish the last step of reclaiming my life. And then finally, this long, bitter chapter could end on my terms. For now, I simply turned off the lights one by one, letting the house settle into its evening breath, not with fear, not with waiting, with readiness. The next morning, I woke before the alarm, though I hadn't set one. Some mornings simply arrive with purpose. I made tea, nothing fancy, just black strong, and sat for a moment at the kitchen table with my hands wrapped around the cup. The house was quiet in the way old houses can be quiet, respectful, steady, holding its breath for me, rather than against me. Today I would sign the final documents with Mr. Kent, not out of fear, not out of anger, but out of a kind of long overdue correction. For years, I had bent my life around other people's comfort. Now, for the first time, I was making choices that weren't softened to protect anyone's feelings. I dressed carefully, not to impress, but to feel precise. The blue cardigan clean slacks my husband's old watch. It didn't run anymore, but it sat on my wrist with the weight of memory, a reminder that there had once been someone in my life who treated my judgment as something to trust, not override. Mr. Kent greeted me with quiet warmth when I arrived. We signed each document methodically. His pen moved quickly, mine moved steadily. He looked over everything twice, then placed the final paper into the protective sleeve. "It's done," he said. I breathed out slowly. "Thank you." "You're not alone in this, Mrs. Howard," he said. "You're simply ahead of them for the first time." Ahead. Yes, that was the feeling. When I stepped outside, the cold wind met me head-on, but it didn't bite. It woke me. On the walk home, I stopped at the grocery store. Just a few things. Bread, apples, tea, no rush, no trembling. My card worked again. My card, mine alone, and even that simple beeping approval at the register felt like something worth noting. As I approached my house, I saw a figure on the porch, tall shoulders slumped. Brian, not angry this time, not demanding, just tired. I climbed the steps slowly. He didn't speak until I reached the door. "Mom," he said, his voice rough. "I'm sorry." Not loud, not dramatic, not performed. Just a sentence said by a man who had finally run out of excuses. I unlocked the door and held it open. "Come inside." We sat in the living room, each in our own chair. The afternoon light lay flat across the carpet. "I didn't think it would go this far," he said. I thought, "I don't know that you'd let us take over like before." "That was the plan," I said. "Not mine, but yours." He nodded. "I was afraid of losing the house, of the bills, of failing again. It felt easier to let you carry it." "I know," I said. "But easier for you doesn't mean right for me." He swallowed, hard eyes fixed on his hands. "Are you ever going to forgive me?" The question settled in the room like dust. Not urgent, not desperate, just human. "I already have," I said. "But forgiveness isn't the same as giving back what I've taken away. Those decisions stand." He nodded again. A slow acceptance, not resistance. "Can we start over?" he asked. "Not over," I said softly. "Forward." He didn't cry. He didn't break. He simply sat there, smaller than the man who had tried to control my life, but more honest than he had been in years. When he finally left, the sun had dipped low, turning the porch light pale and warm. Inside, the house felt peaceful, not triumphant. Peaceful. A kind of peace that arrives only when a long fight ends, without shouting, without revenge, without spectacle. Just the quiet knowledge that I had not let them decide who I was. I made tea again, sat in my chair, and watched the light fade through the window. I wasn't young. My joints ached. My memory had soft spots. But I knew myself fully, fiercely, and without apology. My family had tried to take everything from me in one day. And yet here I was ending this day on my own terms. My life was mine again. My voice was mine again. And tomorrow finally belonged to me. If someone reading this has ever felt small or silenced or pushed aside, then hear me now. Don't wait for permission to take your life back. Start today. Start quietly.